Something is seriously wrong at Apple right now. This isn't a quiet little problem happening in the shadows where nobody can see it. It isn't subtle, and it isn't hidden away in some back office. It is happening right in front of all of us. November was supposed to be a massive month for Apple fans. We were all ready. We were expecting several long-awaited updates to key products across the entire ecosystem. We thought we would finally see a brand new Apple TV arrive in our living rooms. We thought a new and improved AirTag was on the way. A refreshed HomePod Mini was reportedly ready to launch. These weren't just random whispers from strangers on the internet. These weren't vague, hopeful predictions from anonymous sources that nobody trusts. These expectations were shaped by one of the most reliable Apple reporters in the entire world, Mark Gurman. For months, he had been sending out strong signals to the industry. He gave warnings. He gave hints. He even gave direct statements that Apple had new products lined up and completely ready for a November launch date. As we moved closer to the middle of the month, the tension was building. It genuinely felt like major news was about to drop at any moment. But then, nothing happened. Absolutely nothing came out. We saw no new hardware announcements. There were no small software updates to tide us over. We didn't even get a quiet soft launch through a simple press release on their website. Instead, Apple gave us something that felt almost insulting given the massive scale of the company. They gave us a holiday sale banner. Just a simple graphic and a marketing promotion. Nothing more than that. There was no explanation given for the lack of products. There was no acknowledgement at all about the delays. Apple said nothing to address the missing products that were expected, not only by the public, but by the entire technology industry itself. This silence from Apple is simply not normal. It is not typical behavior for them. It is very strange, especially when you look at the facts. Product inventory for all of these items was already dropping dramatically at stores. It is confusing when all the clear signs of an imminent refresh were plastered all over the place. This whole situation gives a very clear impression to everyone watching. Apple is either completely overwhelmed internally by something bigger, or they're seriously mismanaging their smaller products category. Or perhaps they're simply unable to deliver on their own internal schedule and deadlines anymore. Out of all the missing products, the Apple TV stands out as the biggest failure of them all. It exposes a much deeper issue happening inside Apple's entire product strategy. The current Apple TV device still runs on the outdated A15 chip. Yes, this chip can handle basic streaming without any issues. It plays movies fine, but it is absolutely not ready to handle Apple Intelligence. That is the company's new AI framework. Apple Intelligence requires at least the A17 Pro chip or the baseline A18 chip to run correctly and support on-device processing. Apple Intelligence is the biggest software shift the company has made in many years. Yet, one of the core entertainment devices in the living room has not been upgraded to support it all. Think about the patterns here. Apple updates the iPhone every single year without fail. It is guaranteed. MacBooks also receive yearly updates, or at least they follow very predictable refresh cycles. Even the iPads, which sometimes feel a little lost in their own lineup, still receive new chips and improved hardware occasionally. But the Apple TV is different. It is treated like a total afterthought now. It is a forgotten accessory that Apple keeps shipping just because it already exists, not because it is being actively evolved and improved. Mark Gurman repeatedly hinted that a refresh was completely ready to go. He pointed towards stock levels dropping dramatically, signaling a change was coming. He mentioned internal signs showing Apple was preparing for a release during the second week of November. But Apple did nothing at all to capitalize on this. If Apple skips this crucial release window, the sad reality is we won't see a new Apple TV until 2026. This is an absolutely absurd timeline for a product that is already multiple years behind the rest of the industry. Next comes the AirTag. This is a device stuck way back in 2021. It is outdated in terms of its hardware, and it is surrounded by growing controversy. The AirTag still uses Apple's old U1 chip for tracking. Meanwhile, the newest iPhones and other modern Apple devices already include the more advanced U2 chip. This gap between the chips is important for performance. The U2 chip is much more precise. It is much more efficient. It is more consistent in its overall tracking performance. For a device whose entire job is to locate things accurately, falling behind on tracking precision is simply unacceptable. But the delay in hardware is not even the biggest issue surrounding the AirTag. AirTags became infamous not only for helping people find keys and wallets easily. They also became dangerous tools. They were used in stalking and serious misuse. The built-in speaker on the AirTag can be easily disabled physically by anyone who knows what they are doing. The alert sounds that warn people can be avoided or suppressed by users with bad intent. People have filed countless reports about finding hidden AirTags that were used for tracking them without their consent. That fact alone should have been enough to push Apple to completely redesign the product immediately. They could have improved the internal speaker to be louder. They could have made it much harder to remove. They could have changed the internal layout to make physical tampering much more difficult. They could have introduced stronger software alerts or enhanced protective software features. Instead, Apple did nothing to fix the issue for nearly 5 years. AirTags have remained in limbo. They are unchanged and completely unimproved in any meaningful way. And once again, Gurman hinted strongly that a refresh was on the way to fix these issues. Once again, Apple totally ignored the expected launch window for the AirTag. And then there is the HomePod Mini. This is a product Apple seems to have completely forgotten about entirely. The HomePod Mini was first launched back in 2020. It still runs on the ancient S5 chip. This is the exact same chip from the Apple Watch Series 5. That chip was already considered old when the HomePod Mini was first released to the public. Today, that S5 chip is nowhere near capable of supporting Apple Intelligence. That is the company's future direction, isn't it? Instead of a proper hardware update, Apple simply gave the HomePod Mini a few new colors a while back. Then, they just walked away from it completely. There were no meaningful upgrades added to the sound or performance. There has been no mention of future plans or new audio features. And certainly, there is no Apple Intelligence integration at all. Mark Gurman also observed dropping inventory level for the HomePod Mini, just like the other products. He suggested that Apple would refresh the product very soon. Again, nothing happened. This is a recurring theme. Apple Intelligence should have been the perfect reason. It should have been the perfect moment and the perfect opportunity for Apple to release new HomePods with updated chips. This would support the new on-device intelligence features they are building. Instead, Apple is now attempting something strange and confusing for its strategy. They are partnering with companies like Google to integrate Gemini features into the Apple ecosystem. This means Apple Intelligence might rely partially on external systems to function. This seems counterintuitive for Apple. When you think about that major strategic shift, the total absence of refreshed HomePods becomes even more confusing and worrying. If Apple is really building its entire future around intelligence and smart assistants, why would they abandon the speaker that sits right at the center of that smart home experience? Why leave a 4-year-old device in the current product lineup with no clear roadmap for its future? Something about all of this feels totally off. It feels disorganized. It feels like Apple is either seriously struggling with its internal priorities and capacity, or they are intentionally delaying these essential devices for reasons that no one understands yet. When you look at the established pricing expectations for these products, nothing seems unusual at all. The delay isn't about money. The Apple TV is still expected to fall somewhere around $129 to $149 for a new model. The AirTag is expected to stay around $29 to $39 for the new version. The HomePod Mini remains a consistent $99. Large device. The prices are totally predictable. They're consistent with Apple's past product pricing. So, the delay is clearly not about pricing issues. That rules that out. It is purely about execution and prioritization. These are not big, complex products like the iPhone or the Mac. They do not require massive launch events. They do not require super complicated supply chain arrangements like the Vision Pro headset required. Yet, Apple still failed to update them and get them out the door. This is exactly why people are so frustrated right now with the company. This is why analysts are so completely confused by the strategy. This is why the silence from Apple feels so unbelievably loud to the world. Apple usually speaks through its products and its launch timeline. They give clues as to what is next. If something is delayed, there is usually an explanation hidden somewhere in the overall timeline. But this time, there is absolutely nothing to point to. No pattern can be found in the delays. No reason has been given. There are no hints as to when they will arrive. There is just a huge gap where important small devices should have been refreshed and released by now. When you combine this neglect with Apple's current intense focus on artificial intelligence, the absence of these updates becomes even more obvious and alarming. These three devices are the ones that are meant to integrate with intelligence features in the home. These are devices that should grow and evolve with Apple's entire system. And yet, they're being left behind. They're being forgotten in the race to build AI. For now, the reality is clear and disappointing for consumers. Early 2026 has become the most believable launch window for all three products. The new Apple TV, the new AirTag, and the new HomePod Mini. It is deeply disappointing for fans. It is incredibly frustrating for the industry. It strongly suggests that Apple's hardware schedule for smaller non-flagship products is not just slow anymore. It is completely broken. It is mismanaged. When we look deeper into Apple's recent behavior, the lack of updates for these smaller products seems to reveal something more serious about the company's internal workings. It shows a company that is now extremely focused on only its large flagship categories. The iPhone, the Mac, the iPad. Meanwhile, they're clearly losing control over the smaller, yet important products that sit quietly around the ecosystem. These smaller items may not make big headlines. They may not generate massive amounts of revenue on their own, but they play a hugely important role in keeping people locked securely inside Apple's world and ecosystem of products. When they are ignored for years at a time, it raises serious questions about Apple's true priorities. It questions its long-term strategy and its overall direction as a technology company moving forward. Let's remember something many people overlook about Apple's history. Apple once had a stellar reputation for giving even the smallest product in its entire lineup a proper, meaningful upgrade every few years. Even basic accessories like the Magic Keyboard and the Magic Mouse would receive at least a quiet refresh when it was needed. The old airport routers were updated regularly before Apple decided to discontinue them completely. The famous iPod was refreshed almost every single year throughout its entire life as a product. But today, Apple seems to have totally lost interest in maintaining that kind of predictable rhythm. The Apple TV is running totally outdated hardware. The HomePod Mini is using a very old watch chip that is years behind. The AirTag has not moved an inch or been updated since it first launched. This is simply not the Apple that loyal users are used to seeing in the past. It genuinely feels like a serious shift in the company's underlying philosophy and strategy. One of the biggest reasons behind this major shift might be Apple's massive, all-consuming push into artificial intelligence. Apple Intelligence is not just another minor software update like iOS 18. It is a full refoundation of how Apple devices work across the board. The company is completely rebuilding Siri from the ground up to be better. They are rebuilding core system features entirely. They are creating an entirely new layer of intelligence that sits on top of iOS, iPadOS, and macOS for all devices. This enormous project requires staggering resources to pull off. It needs Counsel, SS engineers. It needs designers, researchers, testers, security teams, and expert planning staff. And when Apple shifts this much attention and money into one massive initiative like AI, other parts of the company naturally begin to suffer the consequences of neglect. That suffering is now visible for all to see in the form of missing products. These smaller devices are sitting untouched. They are completely unrevised and totally unchanged because they simply do not have the priority they once did inside the company. Apple Intelligence is absorbing nearly all the attention at the company headquarters right now. And as powerful and massive as Apple is, even they cannot focus on absolutely everything at once and execute flawlessly. But the most shocking part of this entire situation is this. These smaller devices are the exact ones that actually need the updates the most because of Apple Intelligence. They're the essential products that sit in your car, your home, your office, and your everyday life, constantly connected. They're the important accessories that help Apple collect environmental context. They gather critical data points. They record audio cues. They track location details for a better experience. If Apple is truly building an intelligent ecosystem for the future, these devices should be the foundation of that future. They should not be the abandoned corners of the company's focus. If you like the video, subscribe, share the video, and hit the bell icon like that, and give your best opinion about this product.